I'm the Yoga Jedi. Welcome to my video about stretching. Let's do this. Stretching is one of those key aspects of fitness you hear mentioned a lot because it is very important. It helps you to warm up for exercise properly, prevents injury, aids in recovery, and keeps your joints healthy. For these basic purposes, you don't have to know everything there is to know about stretching. And doing something, even if it's not perfect, is always better than doing nothing. But what if you have specific mobility and flexibility related goals and you want to achieve them in the safest and most effective way? Well, for that, we have to get into the science of stretching and making flexibility and mobility gains. And that's what we're here to do today. Talking anatomy, the smallest contractile units in muscles are called sarcomeres. By shortening individually, they allow a whole muscle to shorten or contract. When you stretch a muscle, the fibers inside the sarcomere are pulled apart, lengthening the sarcomere and the whole muscle. When a muscle reaches its full length and can no longer stretch, additional force is placed on the connective tissue that the muscle is attached to and wrapped in. These fibers start to realign themselves in the direction they're being pulled. And that's where the changes will stop, unless, of course, you keep stretching to the point of actually tearing a muscle or tendon, which is not recommended. Getting more flexible is in part a result of changes in your nervous system. There's a system called the stretch reflex that causes muscles to contract when they're lengthened quickly or in a way they're not used to. It's supposed to help maintain muscle tone, allowing your muscles to keep doing whatever they're doing, even with outside forces pushing or pulling on them. Stretching over time will help down-regulate this response more and more. It's believed athletes like dancers can accomplish sudden stretches like high kicks because they've stretched so long that they've achieved a level of voluntary control over the stretch reflex. Long-term stretching can also decrease how dangerous the brain perceives stretching to be, which also means that how painful you perceive stretching to be will decrease, allowing for a larger range of motion. Another physiological change that allows for increased flexibility is changes to the connective tissue. This tissue is mostly made of extremely long fibers called collagen and elastin. Elastin provides elasticity, and collagen provides stiffness and strength. Basically, long-term stretching causes the body to remodel this tissue to adapt to the increased need for a larger range of motion. The long fibers become oriented parallel to each other and to the direction they're being stretched, rather than crossing over or being more disorganized. Stem cells are also induced to remodel the fiber types, such as producing more elastin, and more water is also brought into the tissues. The final main change that the body undergoes actually lengthens the muscle via a process called sarcomerogenesis, when the body actually produces additional contractile units in the muscle. This is also the process occurring in hypertrophy, when muscles get larger from lifting heavy weights. But with hypertrophy, sarcomeres are increasing parallel to one another, creating increased muscle volume. While with increased flexibility, the sarcomeres are increasing in series, creating a longer muscle. Static or passive stretching is when you take your muscles to their greatest range of motion and hold for a prolonged period of time. This is probably the most well-known type of stretching, and for good reason, because it's the most well-researched way to improve mobility and flexibility, treat and prevent injuries like tendinitis, and aid in recovery. Static stretching most effectively promotes the neurological changes associated with increased flexibility, as well as the connective tissue rearrangements. Its effect on the connective tissues is why it's thought to be so beneficial for treating injuries and recovering from intense exercise. PNF stretching stands for proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, and it's when you maximally contract a muscle for 4 to 10 seconds against an immovable object before relaxing it and performing a passive stretch. PNF stretching can help you get the most out of your static stretches by quickly inhibiting the stretch reflex and decreasing a lot of the initial pain and stiffness in the beginning of a stretch. Active stretching is when you use the strength of your own muscles to stretch the muscles that are resisting the movement. Active stretching can help to promote neurological changes by triggering the muscle being stretched to relax. It develops the strength required to actually use the flexibility you're developing and helps to build that movement pattern into muscle memory. Dynamic stretching is when you use your strength in combination with momentum and coordination to stretch in an almost explosive way. This type of stretching allows for increased functional control and coordination and can help develop explosive mobility and strength. It's also a great addition to a warm-up before exercise or just a great way to release tension. Eccentric loading is when you force a muscle to contract while it's lengthening using resistance. This one isn't often listed as a type of stretching alongside the others, but new research is showing it could be one of the most effective ways to promote sarcomerogenesis and actually lengthen the muscles. Before stretching, make sure you're not too cold because cold muscles tear and get hurt easily. You can easily get warm by doing 1 to 2 minutes of light cardio like jumping jacks. Be extra careful if the ambient temperature is cold, if this is the first movement of your day, or if you have a history of tears or pulled muscles. In order to increase flexibility most effectively, research has shown that you need to stretch the area for 10 minutes a week for 6 days in that week, which translates to about 1.5 minutes of stretching each day. Now, when it comes to how long you should hold a static stretch, I've seen so much contradictory information online. I think this is probably due to the fact that research on specific muscles and joints in specific populations with specific protocols doesn't really say a lot about how long you should hold a stretch in general. What research shows is generally important is stretching long enough for the stretch reflex to be inhibited by the inverse stretch reflex, which only occurs after prolonged stretching, a period of time which is probably somewhat different for each muscle group and each individual. My recommendation is to hold any stretch for as long as you can or as long as you feel comfortable. For example, I find that certain stretches, like glute stretches, I need to hold for like 2 minutes before I actually feel the muscles start to release. But other stretches, like tricep stretches, I feel like 15 seconds is sufficient. If you're doing any static stretching in your stretching session, always start with that, especially if your goal is increased flexibility. This will help to dampen the stretch reflex as well as your perception of the stretching pain, so that if you do any active, dynamic, or eccentric loaded stretching later, those will be easier. This will also help lengthen your muscles out to their fully stretched lengths, allowing you to get a better range of motion in your other stretches. The only time you don't want these effects is right before working out, to preserve muscle tension. So if you do add static stretching to your pre-workout warm-up, make sure you only hold each stretch for a few seconds. Anatomical correctness means moving your muscles and joints in ways that they're supposed to move. This will maximize the stretch's effectiveness and prevent injuries. This sometimes involves things like keeping your hips or your shoulders square or keeping your neck in line with the rest of your spine, but it's going to be different for every stretch. When in doubt, look up images or video tutorials to make sure you're in the correct position. And definitely never move in any way that feels wrong or dangerous. When you're getting into a deep stretch, always move slowly and deliberately. It's commonly said you should ease into it. This will minimize the stretch reflex as well as your perception of the pain, as well as allowing you to stop before hurting yourself if something feels too painful. Never move suddenly or bounce your muscles while in a deep stretch. The exception to all of this is dynamic stretching, which can involve sudden movements, but is rarely done in the form of extremely deep stretching for this reason. Even in static stretching, when you want to relax the muscle being stretched as much as possible, it can be helpful or even necessary to engage other muscles. For example, by contracting the muscle that normally causes the stretching muscle to lengthen, we can prevent the stretching muscle from contracting in a process called reciprocal inhibition. So, for example, when I contract my quadriceps, my hamstrings have to lengthen. So when I'm stretching my hamstrings, I contract my quads to help my hamstrings relax. While stretching, you should also engage any muscles necessary to keep yourself in an anatomically correct position, such as keeping your hips square in a hamstring stretch. This isn't always necessary though, because the priority in static stretching is relaxation. So don't do this if it gets in the way of relaxing that stretching muscle. If a stretch is challenging enough to produce results, there will usually be some pain, likely a significant amount. Learning to distinguish normal stretching pain, which may be intense but isn't dangerous, from pain that signals a potential injury is really important. Normal stretching pain often feels like a lengthening, burning sensation deep in the muscle. Pain that signifies a potential injury is often described as something suddenly feeling wrong. It's often very sharp, even electric, and can commonly happen at a joint. It's always better to be safe than sorry. If you're feeling any sensation that you even suspect might indicate a potential injury, stop whatever you're doing and ease out of the stretch. When you're stretching, your focus should always be on your body, specifically on the muscles you're stretching, as well as the muscles you're working in active or dynamic stretching. You might be tempted to distract yourself from the pain, but this will actually only increase your likelihood of injury, as well as impeding the process of building muscular control. You should focus on all the sensations of stretching, especially the level of pain and whether you may be close to hurting yourself. You should also continually and intentionally try to relax the stretching muscles as well as the rest of your body as much as possible. Try to breathe deeply and relax further with each exhale. You can even try visualization exercises, such as imagining the tension evaporating from your muscles like smoke. The adaptations the body undergoes to increase flexibility obviously have the result of decreasing muscle and joint tension, which can have the effect of decreased stability in those areas. This can create an increased risk of injury in and of itself if strengthening is also not done in conjunction with the stretching. Just including a lot of active stretching or eccentric loading can often accomplish this. But if you're doing a lot of deep stretching, I would recommend also doing some strength and hypertrophy training of the muscles you're stretching alongside that. For instance, if you're stretching your glutes, maybe do some hip thrusts alongside that. Or if you're stretching your back, maybe add some deadlifts. Obviously, we first have to ask ourselves, what are our goals? You might want to increase the range of motion for a particular muscle group or gain the mobility required for a specific skill, treat an overuse injury, or just increase the effectiveness of your exercise routine. If you're working on a particular muscle group or area, you're gonna wanna dig into the anatomy. Search up a video or diagram of the muscles, joints, and connective tissues involved, and make sure you know how they move and work together. Always check to see if there's any research or expert advice on stretching the area in question. However, take everything you read with a grain of salt, because everyone is different, experts often disagree, and research is often really limited. The best way for you to stretch may differ from what you read, but being informed is never a bad thing. Based on your goals, which types of stretching will you do? To increase overall range of motion or mobility, you're probably going to have the best outcome from combining static stretching with one or more of the other types. My personal go-to is often a static stretch, an active stretch, and an eccentric loaded stretch. To increase the effectiveness of your workouts and aid in recovery, do active stretching as well as dynamic stretching, or just flow in and out of static stretches before your workout. Then do longer static stretching afterward. To choose specific exercises to start with, it can often be helpful to search online for examples and try a bunch of different ones until you find those that work best for you. And don't be afraid to vary your exercises every day or week or however often you want to keep it interesting or keep your progress up. But as long as you're stretching enough and feeling it in the right place, in the right way, you'll be making progress. Just make sure you're always paying attention to the correct technique for each stretch. Decide which days of the week and at what times you're going to stretch. Remember that stretching at least 6 days a week is important for progress. Take into account that the time of day will affect how you stretch. such as you may need more time to warm up in the morning, and stretching after a big meal might be uncomfortable. A good time to do deep stretches is usually after a workout or other physical activity. However, everyone is different, so make your schedule work for you. For instance, I love stretching in the morning because I feel like it wakes me up and helps me start my day right. Finally, you have to decide how many sets of stretching you'll do and how long you'll do them for. If you're stretching before a workout, you should only be holding static stretches for a few seconds at a time and doing active and dynamic stretches for no more than 30 seconds at a time. Otherwise, static stretches can be held for anywhere from 15 seconds to 3 minutes or even more. There really is no upper limit. Just make sure you're not pushing yourself too hard and causing an injury. For active, dynamic, and eccentric loaded stretches, just do as many reps as you can or until you feel sufficiently challenged. Make sure you pick your number of sets and their durations with your weekly stretching goal in mind. For instance, if you want to stretch for about 10 minutes every week and you're stretching every day, you could do 3 different stretches and hold each for 30 seconds. Or you could do 4 sets and hold each for 20 seconds. Okay, so with all that being said, that brings us to the end of this video. We covered so much in-depth information about stretching that I'm not sure you'll believe me when I say that this is only scratching the surface. There is so much more that can be said about stretching for really specific muscle groups and goals, so much more complexity to the science, but this is a pretty comprehensive overview of what you need to know to get started stretching seriously. I'm going to be making more videos about stretching specific muscle groups in the future, as well as more in-depth principles, so let me know any questions you have or topics you want me to delve into in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss those videos when they drop. Thank you so much for watching. I'm the Yoga Jedi. May the gains be with you, and I just want you to know that you're pretty cool. Okay, bye.